Good morning, everybody. So we are back today to do our 23rd and 24th night of Advent. I'm going to be doing the 23rd day this morning. I unfortunately did not get it posted yesterday. We just had a lot of stuff going on, last minute Christmas stuff, so I had to get that finished. But we're going to do a little differently. We're going to do two names this morning in this video to do the 23rd day, and then tonight I will do the 24th day and do two names on that video as well. That way we'll be caught up, and then on the 25th we can do our final candle. So if you are here for the first time, just so that you're aware of what we're doing it out of, this is an Advent devotional unwrapping the names of Jesus. So this is the book that I have been using to do this series. And we've just been going through and doing the candle services for each Sunday, and then doing names each day of the week. The only one that's been a little different is this week, just so that we can get it finished and finish it on Christmas like it's supposed to be. So, without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started. So our first name is Jesus is the Son of Man. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom of many. Mark 10:45. A close study of the Gospels reveals that the most common title Jesus used for himself is Son of Man. In fact, he used it 81 times in the Gospels, though no one else used it to refer to him. When the Jews heard Jesus call himself the Son of Man, their minds would have immediately leapt to Daniel 7. In this prophecy, Daniel writes about the end times when one like the Son of Man will come with authority to judge the world. Jesus was claiming that title for himself and communicating to his first hearers that he has the right to judge humanity. But this title also refers to Jesus' own humanity. Think of the humility Jesus endured in becoming the Son of Man. God, eternally and magnificent, made himself nothing but by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness, and being found in appearance as a man. He humbled himself and became obedient to death, even death on a cross. Philippians 2:7-8. Jesus emptied himself of heavenly glory while still retaining his deity and submitted to the humiliation of becoming a human. From his position as Lord of the universe, he stooped down to become a servant, washing his disciples' dusty feet. He set aside all his prerogatives excuse me, and became like one of us, bound by time and space, trading all the riches of heaven and becoming poor in both the literal and figurative sense. The Son of Man was unlike any other son or daughter of man, fully God and fully man. Jesus entered our physical existence and experienced the joys and anguishes of being human, yet without sin. What could possibly motivate him to do this? Love. That is the beauty of the doctrine of the incarnation. God, invisible, glorious, and untouchable, took on flesh for us. So y'all, the Son of Man. What an interesting, first of all, I did not know that before I read this, that fact that that is the most used name by Jesus himself for himself, that I had no idea about that, and I also didn't know that he is the only one that actually does that, that refers to himself as the Son of Man. Nobody else has ever done that in the Bible, so that is really an interesting, fact that that he did that. Sorry, y'all, my daughter was trying to grab some decorations that she didn't need to grab. Anyway, but yeah, that is an awesome fact that I did not know. And I think it's a very telling fact, too, because it is, out of all the names to choose, it's the Son of Man. And I think it's very telling that he does use that so many times because it is a reminder. And I think, not only is it the reminder of like what it's talking about with Daniel's prophecy, but I think it's also him reminding us that, hey, I did come down. I did live your life. I did live where you live. I do understand, because I know, I think a lot of the times, especially for those, that maybe didn't necessarily grow up in church or that sort of thing. I think that can be a factor, is like, the fact that, he is a God. He is the God. He is the one God. And he's supposed to be the creator of the universe. He is the master of all things. And so to think about that and then, be like, well, how do you understand what I've went through? That's what those thoughts bring up, because it's like, well, you're a God, you're way up there. You don't have to deal with the stuff down here. Those kind of thoughts, those kind of feelings. And they think that he can't relate, that he doesn't understand, that, he's judging, without truly understanding what we go through. But the fact is that he did go through it. So I think it's very telling that he uses the Son of Man as one of the main titles that he himself said about himself, like that he called himself. Because it is him reminding us that, hey, not only am I the judger, or the one that does the final judgment of man, but I was one of you, and I do understand because I was there. And he did. He came down, lowered himself in the most meek of ways to become a little baby and grow just as we do, born of a mother, and even born when he was born in a little bit harder times than what some would be, because they had a census going on. So Joseph had to travel to his ancestor home of David, and Mary was very, very heavily pregnant when this happened. And there was no room because there was a census. So everybody had come home, and there was no room at any inns. There was nowhere for them to stay. So they had to go and stay in a manger, and had him, with the animals and on the hay and all of these things, which is definitely not the norm even back then. So, not only did he lower himself, but he made sure that the, family he came into was of a meeker setting. They didn't have all the money. They didn't have the baubles. They didn't have the, fancy this and that. And it would have made his life easier and his mission easier had he done that, because that's what they were looking for. They were looking for royalty. They were looking for, a king, whatever. And that's not what he came as. So, it would have made his life easier had he done that, but he didn't. He made sure that he came to us in the most meekest form, the most humble form that he could. And he lived the life that we live every day, but he did it without sin. So he proved that it could be done. He lived the life that we were supposed to live, and then he died the death that we were supposed to take on all of those sins and be our Savior. So I think that's very telling that he chooses that name to remind us of that, to remind us, like I said, not only is he our judger, but he was one of us. He was among us, and he lived the life that we lived. And like I said, really, if we're being honest, lived a harder life than most of us live. I mean, and that's not even, counting his death. I'm just talking about when he lived, much less the sacrifice that he made. Because just in his, life before that, like we've talked about already, from the very beginning, somebody was trying to kill him, which was Herod. So from the very beginning, somebody was after Jesus. And his life continued that way. I mean, it really did, especially once he started traveling and performing his miracles and preaching and that sort of thing. The Pharisees came after him hard, and constantly searched for him, and they never found him until he let them, until it was time. But he had to face all of that. He had to face judgment from others. He had to face, scorn and people making fun of him, and all of those things. And he even had to deal with ultimate betrayal from Judas, so, I mean, he went through all of it, and he still maintained his clean, unblemished soul with no sin, and he loved us so much that he did that he suffered through all that, from everything in his life to his death, for us. So, that's an awesome thing. But, let's check out the challenge for this one. Excuse me, my throat is not wanting to clear again. Ugh. This weather keeps messing with me. Anyway, the challenge is, in one of the most touching scenes in the Gospels, Jesus humbles himself to wash his disciples' feet. Read John 13, 3 through 17. Make a note of what Jesus knew going into the scene, how he responded to the different disciples, including Peter and Judas, and why he acted as he did. Jesus' example calls us to bow low in humble service. Who is God calling you to serve today? Imitate him by stooping down and using your spiritual gifts to serve others as you would serve Christ himself. So, that's a interesting challenge. First of all, I do encourage you, if you definitely read the passage, which it is, just as a reminder, it is John 13, 3 through 17. I do recommend reading that, but if you've never read through the book of John, I recommend reading the book of John entirely. I just finished a study on that, actually, and it was like one of the first ones I've done since I was a child. And one, if you're like me, I definitely recommend it as an adult, because it is a lot easier to see all the nuances and break down the different verses and see all the things that John is trying to convey about Jesus. So I do recommend it as an adult for sure. But if you've just never done one in general, John is a great book, and it's one of the best Gospels in my opinion. And John was probably the closest. I don't want to call him necessarily the favorite, because I think Jesus loved all of his children, equally, if in different ways, including his disciples. But I think John was closest to Jesus, especially, when you go to read it, it talks about their close relationship. He was considered Jesus' best friend. So it's a very, very enlightening view on all the events that happened with Jesus, everything leading up to it. And this is one of the most iconic scenes when we talk about Jesus coming as a servant, and lowering himself to become a servant for us. When we talk about that, this is one of the most iconic scenes that comes up, is when he washes his disciples' feet. And hold on one second, guys, let me grab something. Okay, sorry, I had to grab something for my daughter. But so yes, it's one of the most iconic scenes, and it's because that wasn't done, and even if you read it, that's what the disciples even was kind of their reaction. They were like, God, you really shouldn't be doing this. Why are you doing this? Like, you're our God. We should be washing your feet. You're our master. This is a servant's job. Especially Peter. Peter protested a good bit because of that. And like he said, it's, sorry, y'all, I had to pull something out of the oven. I know I keep pausing the video. I've got a lot of stuff going on. Anyway, but yeah, so it's a very iconic scene. And like I said, all of the disciples were very shocked by it. And it was just very different. And that's why he did it, to show them, I came here to serve you, just as you serve me. And, it mentions Judas because Jesus is the one that betrayed him, and he even washed Judas's feet. He knew what Jesus was going to do. He knew that Judas would be his betrayer, and he still treated him the same. He still loved him, and that is what he calls us to do. That is Christ's love. It's true, it's pure, it's unconditional, and he loved Judas even up to the very end of it. And that is, what he is trying to show us, is that he loves us, and he just wants to forgive us. He wants us to come to him and serve him as he serves us, so that he can forgive us and wash us clean of our sins, so that we can be with him. So it's a very iconic scene. I do recommend you checking out the scripture, and like I said, if you haven't read John, I recommend reading John. Maybe that can be your next Bible study, but it is amazing. Now we will do the prayer, and then I will do the further reading, and then we'll move straight into our next name. So the prayer is, Jesus, Son of God, I am so awed by your life of humble service. You laid aside all glory and majesty to take on the form of a servant. While I grasp at the few strands of popularity and prestige I imagine I have, forgive me, Lord, for the pride in my heart and my desire to be better. than or more important than others. Make me a servant and teach me to serve others joyfully. That's a great prayer. And that is, that's what it's about, is us being a servant to our brothers and sisters and to God. So it's a great prayer. Okay, so the further reading is Daniel 7:13 through 14, John 13:3 through 17, 2 Corinthians 8:9, Philippians 2:5 through 11. So those are the further reading for you. If you do want to kind of do a little bit more research on the Son of Man, those references will give that to you, so you can do a little bit of a deeper dive if you would like. But moving right along to our next one, it is Jesus was a man of sorrows. This isn't a very common one, so this should be interesting. He was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. Isaiah 53:3. In a society that avoids pain at all costs, Jesus' actions are hard to grasp. We're surrounded by medications to relieve pain. Many turn to drugs, abortion, or euthanasia in an effort to eliminate discomfort and inconveniences from life. But rather than run away from pain, Jesus ran headlong into it. In the Garden of Gethsemane we glimpse the mental anguish Jesus experienced before his betrayal. He told his disciples, "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death." Matthew 26:38. And Luke describes Jesus' distress as so intense that his sweat was like drops of blood falling to the ground. 22:44. Knowing full well the suffering that awaited him, Jesus pleaded with the Father to consider an alternative plan. The physical suffering he would have to endure alone would be enough to cause any one of us to turn away, and we now know enough about the Romans' cruelty during crucifixions to be shaken by their brutality. But Jesus also suffered the emotional agony of being forsaken by his Father, and the spiritual anguish of bearing all the ugly, inhumane, horrific sins of the world on his shoulders. It was enough to make anyone want to flee in the opposite direction. But Jesus knew that there was no plan B to satisfy God's righteous wrath. Only he could secure salvation for his beloved creation, so he willingly accepted the hard road before him, even though he did not deserve any of it. The betrayal, the mock trial, the beating, the scorn, the humility, and the torturous death through suffocation on a cross. Amazingly, Jesus had the power to stop it all with just one word, but his love for us compelled him to step forward. He willingly walked into his suffering, humbly allowing himself to be ridiculed by the very ones he came to save. Every agonizing moment he hung on that cross was another whispered yes to this painful course. He who commands the universe and enjoys the worship of angels stepped down from heaven to be despised and rejected by humans. And he did it all for love. Sorry guys, that made me a little teary. It always does, when I think about that. So the man of sorrows, it's not a very common one, but it is true. And he is he is the man of sorrows. He lived that. And that's why I get a little teary-eyed when I read stuff like that, because it is so sad. And it breaks my heart that my Lord had to experience that. And he had to for us, so I know it was a necessary evil, but I hate the thought that he had to do that, and that he had to face all of that, and did most of that, all alone. Yes, his mother was there and he had his disciples, but as far as the actual suffering and having to go through, he had to do it alone. And even at the very end, one of his disciples denied him, which was Peter, 3 times. He denied him 3 times before the rooster crowed. And he was one of his most avid and staunch disciples that, said, "No, God, I would never deny you. You are my Lord." He said that, and claimed it right in front of Jesus, even though Jesus told him, "No, buddy, you're going to deny me." He swore he never would. And then by the time the rooster crowed 3 times, just as Jesus claimed. And he bowed his head and wept because he realized he betrayed him just as everyone else had. So it is such a sad thing to think about. And it does make me a little angry too, you know? I mean, because it's like, why would you do that to a human being in general, much less Jesus, you know? I can't fathom that. So, and it was a brutal death. I mean, crucifixion was one of the most brutal and humiliating ways to die back then. And it was reserved for criminals, you know, for usually the worst of the worst. And yet somehow the God that came to save all of us, he was crucified. But what does give me peace is had that not happened the way it did and he endured the suffering that he did, we wouldn't have that salvation. So that's why he chose to do it. But it is still a very sad thing to think about. And that he is a man of sorrows his whole life. But that's what he came down to do. So I will read the challenge. It is, for many, the Christmas season brings with it disappointment, loss, heartache, regret, and pain. We may lament and grieve what we don't have, even though we're surrounded by kitschy holiday displays and jolly season's greetings. Instead of ignoring this pain, allow it to surface and bring it to the feet of Jesus, who was himself a man of sorrows and understands the burdens that may weigh you down. There would be no joy if Jesus' story had not also included intense suffering and rejection. Today, meditate on Jesus' agony during his last moments on earth, John 18-19. Reflect on the fact that he knew fully what awaited him at the cross, but still submitted to the Father's will. Then spend the rest of your day worshiping him, who was a man of sorrows and is now exalted at God's right hand. That is one of the most beautiful things about Jesus as our Savior, because we can come to him. He does understand, like we just talked about with the Son of Man name. He purposely lowered himself to us, came down to us to live as we live, so that he could be that, so that he could understand, so that he could show us that he did understand, that he lived it himself, and he knows. So what an amazing thing, you know, as much as it breaks our heart that he goes through this and that he is the man of sorrows. What an amazing thing that because of that, we are able to bring our sorrows, our pain, all of those things to him and lay it at his feet, because he understands and he is with us and he is there to comfort us. And we wouldn't have that if it wasn't for what he went through. So I do encourage you definitely to go, if you have not, either haven't heard the crucifixion story, or maybe, you know, it's been a while since you've read through it, that sort of thing. I highly encourage you to go read John 18 and 19. Because that is what those whole two chapters are about. And it really helps you understand exactly what he went through, the suffering he endured, in order to be able to meditate on it and truly understand, you know, what, not only what he went through, but the fact that he knew that it was going to happen. He was, ready for it. And he, even though, you know, he asked God if there was a different way, he accepted the fact that there wasn't. He knew there wasn't, and he went willingly to do it, to suffer. He stepped up for us. And then, like it says, then spend the rest of your day worshiping him, who was a man of sorrows and is now exalted at God's right hand, which is the great thing. So as sad as that name is, it no longer applies to him as far as now, because he has risen and he is at the right hand of his Father and preparing a place for us. So what an amazing thing, you know, that he went from this man of sorrows to a truly exalted God, and that he, you know, just loves us that much, that he did that for us. Okay, sorry y'all. But so yes, it's an amazing thing. and it's something to be celebrated, even though he suffered like he did, the ultimate goal in the resurrection and what he did for us is something to celebrate. So please go read John, reacquaint yourself, and meditate on it. Truly understand. And then spend your day rejoicing and worshiping him. Alright, so we're going to do the prayer, and then I will do the further reading, and then that'll be it for this video, and I'll see y'all later this evening for the next one. So the prayer is, O Lord, what can I say in the face of such love? The punishment that brought me peace fell upon you, and you willingly leaned into the suffering meant for me. Every sorrow and suffering I face, you faced first, and bore the wrath of God for me. Thank you, precious Jesus. Thank you. I'm going to read that one more time. O Lord, what can I say in the face of such love? The punishment that brought me peace fell upon you, and you willingly leaned into the suffering meant for me. Every sorrow and suffering I face, you faced first, and bore the wrath of God for me. Thank you, precious Jesus. Thank you. Alright, y'all. So that was the prayer. It's a very good one. And it is an amazing love, it's just a truly amazing thing. So for the further study, we do have Psalm 69:29, Isaiah 53, and John 10:17 through 18. So if you do want to do a little bit of deeper diving on the Man of Sorrows, I would recommend checking those out. But that's all for now. I will see y'all later this evening to go over our last name, as well as the activities for the week to help us practice love. And then after that, we will be doing our final meeting tomorrow to light our final candle. So I hope that this video finds you well. I hope you're having a wonderful Christmas season and getting time to spend with your family and do all those things, and keeping Jesus at the center of it and remembering to celebrate him this season. So I hope you have a wonderful day, and I wish you a very Merry Christmas, and I will see y'all later this evening.